The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Hey everybody, it's Kip Keefer. Time for another edition of Need to Know. Welcome to the program. Got to start off by apologizing. I told you last week here that we would have Terre Quillian with us, who was going to talk about a very interesting subject that I am certainly going to keep in the bank for a future episode, hopefully next week. But there's been so much breaking news and so much going on in the last couple of days that we've had to reverse course and to stay as current and topical as possible. It's important to be able to make that adjustment. So again, apologies. Hopefully we'll have Terre on with us this time next week. It's been an interesting week, as I mentioned. Some things have happened that have never happened before, and I'm going to talk about those. And you can probably guess where I'm going to start. Well, maybe not. It's the Belmont Stakes on Saturday, televised for the first time on Fox, the third jewel of the Triple Crown, the 50th anniversary of Secretariat pulling off one of the great athletic feats of all time, winning the Triple Crown and the Belmont Stakes by 31 lengths. Now, picture a horse, and then picture 31 horses from the first horse back to the last horse in imaginary space. That's how far he won the race by. He set the all-time stakes and world record for a 1.5 mile race. That was in 1973, 50 years ago. That record still stands today, and really no horse has come close to matching his final time of 2 minutes, 24 seconds. So the Belmont telecast for the first time by Fox. The effort wasn't terrible. Kurt Menefee, who's the football host for Fox and does a lot of their other anchoring duties, really kind of a ill fit because he's not much of a horse racing expert. You can tell that in his initial comments and a lot of his questions of his experts. Some of the reporters they had a little weak. The odd part about that is Fox does a lot of horse racing on a show called America's Day at the Races, and they've got a very good staff. But anyway, the show was subpar. But then an absolutely unpardonable sin. The one time I went to the Belmont, the most memorable part of that was when the bugler summons the horses to the track, and the unbelievable, powerful, defining song of New York City, sung by the iconic, legendary Frank Sinatra, who was not a man, he was the man. And his rendition just rings through every inch of that massive facility with its 1.5 mile track. It is what New York's all about. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, celebrating what once was the greatest city on earth. But this time, the Fox folks called an audible, and it was just a blasphemous act of not having Frank Sinatra sing the lyrics. Frank was shelved. Frank was sent to the bench in favor of some no-name wannabe Ramada Inn lounge singer who happened to have been a recent contestant on American Idol. Now, first of all, I didn't know American Idol was still on the air. It was popular about 25 years ago. There's about 15 different singing and competition shows. I've lost American Idol. I don't even acknowledge its existence. So to have this guy stand out there and sing his rendition, which is nowhere in the same universe in terms of impact and, again, the defining version of the song, he had kind of a croony style, and It was just again blasphemous, an abomination. What a shameless promotional attempt by Fox, gone horribly wrong, because they have no understanding of how people identify with that song by Frank Sinatra, not by this lounge singer, being a defining moment in every year's Belmont. I was looking forward to it. I had just run to the kitchen and was scurrying back so I wouldn't miss it. And then they pull that change and put that bozo out there instead of the chairman of the board. So shockingly bad decision by the Fox people, and shame on NYRA, the New York Racing Association, for acquiescing to their request to have Frank on the bench. So that was bad. Also, of course, in the race, there was some good history, because Jenna Antonucci, a very good trainer in New York, who has never had the caliber of horses to compete at this level, had the amazing story of her 27-1 horse, Arcangelo, being the shocking upset winner over all the Blue Bloods. 4 of the trainers in the race had won Triple Crown races, and all of them are in the Hall of Fame. So Jenna Antonucci becomes the first female trainer to ever win a Triple Crown race. So props to her. History made at Belmont. And let's see, what other incident happened last week that's unprecedented in American history? Oh, yeah, I remember. The former president of the United States, Donald Trump, was indicted by the Department of Injustice. And I said that purposely because that is what this agency of the U.S. government has become. Now, we've been talking about this not only here on Need to Know, but Terry, Quillian, and I, all the way back to our radio program, The Ride Home, in 2017, talked about the Obama administration achieving their mission of seating so many of our bureaus and our departments and our agencies with politicized people that have an agenda to overhaul much of the liberty and freedom and all of the things, the founding traditions that we enjoy as Americans. And the reason for that, because they want a massive, bloated, centralized government that controls everything and is impossible to challenge or assault from a standpoint of free speech and freedom of expression and all the other constitutional guarantees that our forefathers painstakingly laid out to protect us from just this very thing happening. When you get politicization of departments that need to be neutral and equally apply liberty and freedom rights for all, particularly equal treatment under the law, well, the game is lost. And the irony that they continuously spew the words, "This is a threat to our democracy." The threat to our democracy is what they have put in place. And if you need proof, we can go right back to those guys I just mentioned, the founding fathers, the framers, the guys who crafted this brilliant experiment called America. What did they have to say in the Constitution that has been adopted and been the letter of the law in our country for our first 235 odd years until these jackals have come along and tried to overhaul everything? They stand on this constitutional ground, a threat to our democracy, but they pick and choose passages that serve their purpose and totally ignore and overlook and disregard passages of the Constitution that keeps this kind of power grab from happening theoretically. And let's talk about the Department of Justice and the FBI specifically. What did the framers have to say about the Department of Justice? What was their conception of that? Well, like so many times here on Need to Know, I'm going to tell you something that you're not hearing in any other corner or on any other show. What was the framers' conception of the Department of Justice? They did not have one. They did not have a Department of Justice laid out and created by our original founding principles. And the reason for that, the founding fathers were terrified that this experiment would be bastardized, invaded, and hijacked by these kind of people who are trying to create a total power and control of American life with a huge, bloated, centralized government. So they had no conception of a Department of Justice, and that actually did not come along until 1870. Until then, the only legal involvement of the federal government was in the executive branch, where presidents had some lawyers on board to litigate and settle matters where the U.S. government was attempting to be sued or was involved in territorial disputes, etc. But there was no formal Department of Justice until just after the Civil War, when litigation and those kind of disputes just blew up. And Congress felt like it was necessary to create a Department of Justice headed by an attorney general that, for some reason, even though Congress has created this monster and has total oversight over it, they give the executive, the incoming president, the right to choose the attorney general. Now, that's problematic in a lot of different ways, because when the executive, the president, is questionable in character and deeds, like our current president, Joe Biden, it is very, very ridiculous that the attorney general, who is sworn to uphold the Constitution of the United States, is beholden to that president. And I think if you look back in history, there's always been a pattern of people questioning the loyalty factor. Is the attorney general beholden to the Constitution or to the executive, the president who actually appointed him or her? And that is the question that's resounding today, because this attorney general has basically had his hands folded and says this is not a political situation, the indictment of Donald Trump. This is a clear violation of a law that they've called into question about possession of documents, which basically is a civil matter. It's not criminal, and it can be applied criminally to almost any other citizen in the country. If you or I somehow come into possession of classified documents without security clearance, then we are not allowed to even handle those, let alone read them or share the information in any way, shape, or form. The recent leak of a lot of classified information by the National Guard soldier, which was really absurd, that he had the security clearance and the ability to put a lot of that information in public. That guy is under lock and key and thrown into the jail waiting trial. That's a different situation than a president of the United States, the chief executive, given broad powers by the Constitution and the founders, and certainly privy to all the classified information that is available, and also with the power to declassify any of that information at his whim without even a process. So for Donald Trump to have possession of documents is certainly not a criminal offense as it's defined. And I'm not a lawyer. My law degree is from Target. But I can tell you that just common sense dictates that anyone other than the president may be subjected to the charges that have been brought, but certainly not the president of the United States or even the former president of the United States. And has Trump acted improperly, arrogantly, defiantly? Yes. but that is Donald Trump, and that is who we are used to dealing with. And Donald Trump's experience with the federal government, well, let's just say he has been a giant target since the day he came down the escalator at Trump Tower to announce his candidacy for the presidency in 2015 for the 2016 election. He has been targeted. He has been abused. He has been run through the ringer of accusation and false allegation. And this has left him with this defiant, stick it attitude toward what he knows are politicized agencies like the Department of Justice. So Trump's lack of cooperation in these matters maybe isn't justifiable, but it's not criminal based on the history. And if I need to remind you of that history, Donald Trump, the Republican president candidate in 2016, was immediately targeted in the FBI investigation of the alleged Russian collusion, which never existed. They even falsified documents to obtain a series of FISA warrants, which are required to basically spy on an American citizen. They have to bring evidence to a judge that says we have just cause to do that, which expressly is against the law under any other circumstance. But the Patriot Act after 9/11 changed that provision to where a court could decide if the government could investigate someone suspected of misdeeds and collusion with enemy foreign states. So that is an absolute documented fact. The creation of the Mueller probe, which cost you and I, the taxpayers, $45 million and lasted over 2 years, just hopefully on their part digging for information to try and prove that some aspect of these ridiculous allegations, which began with a discussion in a bar in London and emanated into false information about Donald Trump and his association with the Russians, became this full-blown investigation, and there was nothing to it. There was no proof. It was an all-Democrat, all-leftist, all-star elite Ivy League team that probed every aspect of this and came up with nothing. You hear all the time Democrats go, oh, that allegation's not true. It's been debunked. This one wasn't debunked. This one was investigated up and down with considerable expense and resources exhausted, and there was nothing there. So that was just the beginning. Trump would also be subjected in his presidency to not one, but 2 impeachment proceedings. The first for nefarious dealings with the Ukrainian president when he urged him to provide information relating to Joe Biden and his behavior, which now is front page news as the FBI, after much hesitation, we talked about this on the show a couple weeks ago, the FBI would not turn over the evidence to the Congressional Oversight Committee in the House of Representatives, once again, the entity that created the FBI and has full lawful ability to oversee every aspect of their operation. But guess what? The FBI director, Christopher Wray, a Donald Trump appointee and a terrible mistake by Trump, it led to the problem of them not complying, and that is just straight unlawful. He had to be threatened with contempt of Congress, which really is kind of a toothless thing because they really don't have any enforcement power. That falls on the Department of Justice in the event that they find somebody in contempt. Well, the Department of Justice was not going to step in and enforce anything against their own FBI director, which again points to the absurdity of the structure of the situation. But amazingly, Christopher Wray did comply and allowed the Oversight Committee in private circumstances to come in and read the documents, the evidentiary documents supplied by an informant that the FBI rates the highest of quality, that the Biden administration in Ukraine was guilty of all kinds of different misdeeds. Hunter Biden, James Biden, and then Vice President Joe Biden basically got huge payments for corruption intervention and suppression of an investigation of the Burisma energy company, which was the largest supplier in Ukraine. And of course, Hunter Biden, with all of his extensive experience in gas and oil, after being dishonorably discharged for being a drug addict in the U.S. military, all of a sudden, Hunter Biden, with all of his experience and expertise, had a seat on the board at Burisma. How about that? For $85,000 a month. Pretty good gig for somebody who absolutely had no qualifications of being there other than his last name being Biden. So I'm getting off the track a little bit. I want to get back to the story as it's unfolding. The FBI, you ask, what was the view by the founders on the FBI, a federal law enforcement agency? Well, once again, they had no feeling on that. They had no conception of it because they didn't create it. They didn't think it was necessary. The federal government was not designed to be the all-powerful entity that oversees every aspect of American life. And the founders particularly were disturbed, and the reason that they were in America was to escape tyranny and absolute rule by a monarchy where they could just arbitrarily issue a general warrant that allowed them to search anyone, to probe into anyone's affairs. They tried to take extreme measures to make sure that there weren't a federal entity that could do those kind of things to American citizens. But, of course, in 1907, because of threats around the world and domestic concerns, the FBI was created. Once again, if you guess Congress, you're correct. And the FBI has been up and running ever since, assigned to oversight by the Department of Justice, which is overseen by the Congress, the House of Representatives. Now, the biggest stick the House of Representatives and Congress has over these agencies is they are the funding mechanism for all of their operations. And those budgets continue to bloat year after year after year. You want to reverse all of this nonsense? Just cut off their funding. You say, you know what? This is a mess. These agencies have been totally politicized. We need to change the guard and start all over again. We are not allocating any funding, and these agencies are history. That doesn't mean you have to junk them and not try to recreate something better, but you have the ability, Congressman, to make that decision and cut off their funding because they're not serving their purpose now. They are not allegiant to the Constitution. They are beholden to this leftist, progressive, massive, bloated government movement. Now, I'll remind you, because I've told you before, who they are. They're not faceless people, but they are a collection of a shadow government that our country has now in place. And these guys all fit the profile almost to the letter. Almost every one of them are rather elitist in attitude, from a very well-heeled background, families with fortunes and a lot of history, mostly from the Northeast, almost every one of them Ivy League educated. And these are the people who have presumed and have declared themselves superior to regular American citizens. They know best. They know how to run your life better than you do, and they need to be in charge. And any threat to that, like Donald Trump, who is the ultimate strong man who doesn't take their guff, who doesn't care about their ridicule, who shakes off any label they put on him and continues like the Energizer Buddy to power through every challenge to him being the president for all the people, this populist movement that has shocked everyone. He is the Antichrist in the whole theory that they're trying to perpetrate, and they are taking whatever steps necessary to derail who was the former president of the United States, and also through all the January 6th investigations, which they were hoping to get indictments, but came up short, could not do that because Donald Trump was not directly involved in what was called this insurrection, which was really an orchestrated opening of the Capitol. So a bunch of zealots who really didn't think what they were doing made a terrible mistake, and it's cost a lot of them a lot of their lives, fortunes, and freedom. But Donald Trump was not the instigator, was not there, did not lead the charge. So it was another failed attempt to tear him down. This ridiculous indictment in New York where they're trying to claim campaign finance allegations, which is a federal offense. The state has nothing to do with that. That has been laughed off by experts. But these charges are more intense in terms of trying to derail Trump, who is the leading contender for the presidency. And who is behind directly this? Well, you're going to be shocked to hear, but the special counsel appointed by our neutral attorney general appointed by Joe Biden, who, by the way, knows nothing about these allegations and has had no involvement, according to him, in what has taken place. The guy's name is Jack Smith. That's his real name, not an alias. Jack Smith was born in upstate New York, attended New York University, probably the most liberal institution in the country, and achieved a political science degree before going on to, ready for this, Harvard Law School to claim his law degree. So he started off in political science, but then collected an Ivy League law degree. He is the prototype. He is the poster boy for the kind of people I'm talking about repeatedly here on this show and the kind of people you need to be aware of because they're trying to take your country away. So maybe that's some things that you were not aware of or needed to be reminded of, that this is the playbook straight down the line. Just like we have in banana republics and Marxist countries and communist countries, if there's political opposition, get them out of the way. Get them jailed, get them accused, get them completely shunned by the public. But they're going to make a mistake here because, as we talked about last week, these kind of people and these kind of movements always blow themselves up. And all they're doing by persecuting, not prosecuting, but persecuting Donald Trump is making him stronger and more popular and a symbol for the oppression and the absurdity that these people are trying to sell to the American people. We're not going to buy it. It's not going to work. Donald Trump is in a better position than ever because this is going to linger on for years, and Donald Trump will have a public referendum on his fitness to be president. And if he gets in office, think about this. He has the ability to pardon himself and dismiss all of these bogus charges. That's all the time we have for this week. Hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you learned something that you didn't know or, again, had your memory triggered. I'm Kip Keefer. Always great to be with you. Back again next week with more of what you need to know.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.